Hi, I am Patricia Mungcal from the National Council of Churches in the Philippines. I am the Assistant Program Director for the Program Unit on Faith, Witness, and Service. This is the Council's development unit. And my work focuses on emergency response, to rehabilitation, disaster risk reduction and preparedness, and also climate change adaptation. And I had the privilege to join the ACT Alliance ecumenical delegation to the 30th Conference of Parties of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change in Belém, Brazil last November. And coming to COP30, it is I was burdened with the emergencies here in the Philippines because I left the country with our communities still reeling from a series of catastrophic disasters. We had an earthquake, series of typhoons, and even a super typhoon. With little resources that we have to deploy our emergency teams. We had to mobilize our local church networks for emergency response. And we have witnessed livelihoods and farmlands being submerged in floodwaters. We witnessed homes being washed away by flash floods, being blown away by winds, and also families who are now homeless. And it is important to note that at the heart of these communities, it is women and girls who suffer the most. Women and girls from poor farming, fishing, indigenous communities, women and girls from the workers sector. These are the marginalized and vulnerable groups who suffer the most and the heaviest impacts of the climate crisis. And these are the stories that I carried with me as I participated in COP30. I joined the ecumenical delegation in lobbying to world leaders. I lobbied to my own national government about the calls and the people's demands for accountability, for climate reparations, for climate finance, for just and adequate support, for adaptation, for loss and damage and mitigation. I also joined the faith-based community, the civil society organizations, and the people's movements in campaigning and echoing the calls from the ground, the calls of the most affected communities for justice, for climate justice, for adequate support, and for accountability. And of course, the negotiations happened, and we had the the final decision released. And I came home disappointed with meager progress in terms of climate commitments. Yes, some would say that there are things to celebrate, like commitments or text on tripling the adaptation fund, or the gender language being included in the presidency decision. But thinking about it, what is the concrete commitments, what is the concrete contributions and solutions that I will be able to go home and to report back to our communities? And this is the real question. What is the impact of COP30 to our communities, of COP30 to disaster-affected communities and those who are vulnerable to the climate crisis? If these are all text, language, if these are all words, but there are no commitments and concrete contributions, where does it all go? And somehow I was reaffirmed that the real climate solutions, the real actions, come from the ground. I see it in community-based adaptation efforts. I see it in the grassroots movements. And we demand it from the national government for accountability, for them to serve and to cater for the needs of the most affected and most vulnerable. and then the people, the most affected peoples and communities continue to demand justice and climate reparations from the global major polluters. This is where I find my hope. And I see how activism also plays a role in here. For me personally, activism is both political and personal. I am a young woman who is leading the humanitarian response program in one of the most disaster-prone countries in the world. And my country, the Philippines, is the most dangerous country for environmental defenders in Asia. It is risky, it is scary, but in activism, I find hope. In actions, I find hope that I am not alone, of course, in doing this. I am not alone in demanding for justice and calling for peace and demanding for accountability and climate reparations. I am enjoined by the faith-based community, by churches, and by the communities themselves. And personally, this is where I gain my empowerment from. It is not mine inherently, but I gain it from the movement, from the community that I am in. And I hope this story will be able to inspire hope that in the face of the climate crisis, in the face of a world of violence, there are people who are telling the truth. There are people who have steadfast optimism that change is possible and change starts from the ground, and there are actors, there are people who are already planting the seeds for justice and peace. Thank you.